Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we're going to be discussing dry tripping. So exciting. Don't have any guests today. It's all me talking straight to you, and I'm so excited about it because I've missed you guys and missed being able to just ramble a little bit. Of course, I'm going to have more guests coming on, but this one I wanted to make sure was a straight-on conversation with you because there's a lot to it. Now, before we dive in, please make sure you visit marinamars.com and add your name and email address to our mailing list. This is where you'll start to receive more news, recipes, courses, workshops, industry happenings, and more. So this way, if any of the information that I'm about to give you or have given you in past or future episodes, hit something inside you that you want to talk a little bit more about, dive deeper with me about, this is where you do that. That's where those resources are. So all that being said, I want to just dive right into talking about dry tripping. So let's talk about what it is and why it's such a big deal right now. So according to a recent survey done by hotels.com, dry tripping, or taking alcohol-free vacations, is on the rise, especially among young people. This trend is driving a shift in the hospitality industry, and it is so palpable. Many hotels and resorts and restaurants all around the world are catering to sober, curious travelers. Tyler and I see this quite a bit as we travel also, and I'll dive into those kind of examples in a bit here, but something to note here is that these accommodations are actually offering really great alcohol-free beverage options, mocktail-making classes, and even detox-focused amenities. Like, even the way that these menus are being structured looks differently. I'm used to mocktails being shoved towards the back or put with the kids and the sodas, and it's not really given the time or space that I think that it deserves, for not just because, these ingredients are better or different, because there's a whole experience. You hear me talking about the fact that drinks are an experience. They're an opportunity for storytelling. They're an opportunity to create a ritual. Like, it's so much more than just what's in the drink. So the fact that it's actually changing culturally, it's moving where it's at on the menu itself. This is huge. This trend is driving a huge shift. It's interesting, of course, while baby boomers have slightly increased their drinking habits, only 42% of millennials claim to drink nowadays. For Gen Z, this total is even lower, with only 21% drinking regularly. Now, of course, anytime I see these percentages, this was done by Gallup, that specific study there, but these are constantly changing, and the definition of regularly drinking is also changing. So especially from one generation to another, might think one thing is regular, like it used to be very normal to just smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey all day, right? That was the definition of regular back in the day. Now, even when I was in college, I feel like the definition of regularly drinking was more like, okay, well, you're not drinking during the day at work or in class, but definitely, with dinner, to cap off of an event, So that definition of regular drinking has shifted, obviously, from the 50s to, early 2000s, but even from 5 years ago to 2024, there's a huge definition shift in this regular drinking. So anytime I throw numbers out or other people throw numbers out, as a mathematician, I'm here to just let you know that numbers are usually trash until there is context provided. So, Gallup's version of this study is going to look different than if someone else does it and asks people questions. Something important to mention, because if I'm about to say 50% of travelers say they'd be interested in staying in a hotel that offers easily accessible alcohol-free options, that's huge. It is huge. Literally half of people are really starting to get to know what this market's all about, how it can help. Another example, I had a friend and business colleague go to a farmer's market recently here in the Las Vegas area, and he was just trying to ask everybody, hey, do you know what Kava is? And it was shocking how many people actually did know what it is nowadays, which is really cool, but they still have no idea anything other than the name. They've started to hear the name, right? And that's very different from 2 years ago. So point of this whole story is there are a lot of people who are incredibly curious, and I'm never going to get bogged down with details of exact facts and figures. But the moment it's anywhere near 50% of people, regardless of how you're going to splice and dice that data, that is a lot of people. That is every other person that you talk to could potentially be interested in your product, whether they are from Kentucky or California. It doesn't matter. People are having these conversations because, addiction of all different types affects all of us. And beyond that, even if we don't take it that far, the health conditions that, drugs and alcohol provide. Do you really feel better coming back from vacation if you have to nurse a hangover? Do you really feel rested? Do you really feel better going back into whatever job you have or position you have in life if you just spent your time off, literally poisoning yourself? Probably not. Wellness is a much more considered and integrated experience at hotels now, which is really, really cool to see. It makes me not feel like I need to hide all the time. I used to be the kind, before I got sober, before the pandemic, I think getting sober around the pandemic was kind of just a crazy extra time. But before those two events happened, I would go to all these different events and experiences. And if I wasn't having that great of a time, I'd make a great time out of it in my head by adding some substance to it. And, it would all end up kind of a hot mess, to be honest with you. But looking forward nowadays, it's getting sober during the pandemic meant that there was nowhere to go in the world for anyone, right? But especially if you're in a healing cocoon phase of your life, which can last years, it doesn't just typically last months. I feel like I'm just starting to get out of my cocoon phase where I couldn't trust anything in the world because around every corner was a vice. Around every corner was something that wanted to throw me off target, take me off focus. Even if I'm just trying to enjoy myself on a vacation or even a work trip, it was so difficult because nothing was for me, to the point where I literally quit my career, guys. I literally quit and did not go back to performing, even though I was doing it at a very high and professional level. I was making money. I was getting the recognition that I had always wanted. I'd moved to Vegas. I'd done all the things, I'd won medals. I'd been on, Hall of Fame stages, and I literally had to leave all of it. It is all so gross to me because of all of the stuff that kind of surrounds it. Alcohol being a huge thing where it's in order to have a good show, in order to have a successful production, you have to have the bar selling enough alcohol in order for you to make money because you're getting a cut of bar sales. So you're just telling people to poison themselves, even though, as an artist, I always tried to make shows that were express yourself, be your real self while I'm drinking alcohol. It's just so infuriating looking back at it. And the point of this whole story is you want to be able to create an environment for people to actually enjoy and rest and have a good experience and connect and do all these words that, I feel that alcohol disconnects us from, right? And so there's so much to consider here. And let's just take all of that aside, right? Traveling in and of itself takes a toll on your body. Long distance drives or dreaded jet lag, either way, these things are going to make you feel sick. When I was in Hawaii with my husband, we had a multi-purpose trip here. There was a work component to it where we were doing a lot of research and kind of outreach. And then we also had a personal note where we did get to attend a wedding. And, we haven't gotten to take our honeymoon yet. So our goal was to make this Hawaiian experience this beautiful, awesome, fun thing, right? Multifaceted. And 2 out of the 7 days that we were there, I literally could not leave the entire Airbnb because I was so sick. And the type of sick that I was, we believe that it was food poisoning from this crazy situation where there was a bunch of pigeons. But point of the story is when you're already traveling and you're thousands of miles from home and you're in this new environment, your body's defenses can go up a little bit. And, you can do your best at taking taking care of your immune system. But let's say that you are a health nut and you're doing all these things to take care of yourself. You travel, but then you're like, oh, I'll just have a cocktail. And you were in kind of a divey bar, or just like, even if it was a nice place, that alcohol is going to take your immune system down, which means you're going to feel exhausted from your travels instead of, invigorated. And we want to make sure that health consciousness has the means and ability to be wherever you are, right? This is huge. This whole concept of dry tripping isn't just changing how some people travel, but it's also changing the way people date. Like when they go on dates, it's changing the way that people attend social events like weddings, even corporate events. It used to be so normal, and in some industries it still is, to have a bunch of alcohol around, but there's a lot more mocktails popping up. There's a lot more options, and people are starting to realize that they've been so disconnected over time, whether it's from technology, whether it's from the effects of quarantine. Again, I know that was 4 years ago, almost to the day. I'm recording this on March 11th, and it's still something that, like, I feel like we still haven't talked enough about. Like, these are the kinds of things that do get stuck inside of us. This affected a lot of people, especially if you want to look at Gen Z, why this trend is occurring, why people aren't as into drinking. Well, some of them, I have a very good friend who was a freshman in college the year that the quarantines were happening. So she got stuck in a dorm room, and that was like a microcosm of college, which just made it tenfold more difficult. So she learned a lot of life lessons very quickly in life, which of course on the other side can always be a blessing. But when you're in the middle of it, it's just, it became so much more obvious to Gen Z in this case, why drinking wasn't great. I mean, you saw it when you were stuck in your dorm room for a year. You're stuck on the same floor as people. You start to see people who get a little too comfortable. They're not in an external environment. They're not, moving around. They don't have these other social barriers that normally occur. The social barriers were completely out of whack. Some were in places they shouldn't have been, and some were needed and they weren't there at all during this time. So there's a lot. I can't stress this enough. There's so many reasons. It's not just about people who hit the deep end. It's people who saw the deep end and never want to go back. It's people who were traumatized by, not like they themselves with the addiction, but they saw what it does to other people. They saw the way that it immediately impacted in a, again, when you're locked up in a room, like, the alcohol is gonna have negative side effects a lot faster than when you get to go out, and do all these things. So there's so much I want any listener out there to consider outside of their own experience, because I know that according to Instagram and Libsyn, all of my listeners and my audience are very honestly in a very large range. I have Gen Z, I've got millennials, I've got boomers, I've got everybody listening in, which is so exciting. So I just want you to do that experiment real quick and think, okay, first off, where was I during quarantine, and where were people who were in my generation, and where were people who weren't? Yes, of course, like, for example, my parents have lived out in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, for a minute. And so they were like completely unaffected, and they already were, stocking up on toilet paper, stocking up on all this stuff. Because when you live in the middle of nowhere, that's what you have to do. So some people, they were like, oh, it made my life better. In the same breath that someone else in their family is like, you guys, I had a really hard time. Like, you guys might have had a good time, but like, I was literally going through hell. That was definitely my case. I not only was leaving the industry, getting sober, I moved to a different state where I knew nobody, and I was really just like so hard focused on healing, really, and trying to make sense of everything, especially because I was watching so many people just go down greatly terrible paths with the isolation. And even as things had opened up, again, it's 2024 on this recording. Why am I talking about an event that happened 4 years ago? Because there are still people who are highly affected. Their nervous systems never healed from that. They never got to have certain very important social experiences because of that. And now they've got this different level of anxiety, this different level and flavor. You can't pretend like, oh, well, when I was your age, I had that anxiety too. The world is so different now. I can't pretend that me being born in 1994, I can't pretend that I have lived the same life as, these Gen Zers, because I had a childhood I didn't get my first cell phone until I was in middle school. And even then it was literally the kind that was like a flip phone that I shared with my brother. So I didn't even get my first smartphone until I was out of college. So there are certain things, like I was on MySpace for perspective. Like there were like social media, being big on social media. Like I made it to like 28,000 friends on MySpace, right? So before the word influencer was ever even coined, I had that title. But then the moment we switched over to like Facebook and Instagram, I was like, oh, I hate this. And then, the point of this whole story is we all grew up with different things, like different anxieties and different programming. And you also have to remember that as the years go on, things like marketing and propaganda in general just gets more and more precise and more nuanced, more covert. So it becomes hard to see that some of your favorite movies may have actually inspired you to make terrible decisions. My husband and I really love like early 2000s comedy. I know it's terrible. I know it's not politically correct, but it's a really refreshing thing that we find. We always go back and watch these movies and we see, okay, what things instilled fear that it's now a normal cultural narrative, what things are still fucking hilarious, and what things, like, they may not have aged well. But if you just take a look at like the media that came from your time versus the media that's happening now, like let's even just talk about Mean Girls. Have you seen Mean Girls, the original one, and then Mean Girls, like the remake that they just did this year? They literally they tried to keep so much of the script the same, and then they changed certain little things just to sound some type of way. And it completely, like, it almost doesn't cut as deep. Like, it wasn't as deeply impactful of a film. It wasn't interesting. Honestly, I felt the anxiety watching it because people no longer have the ability, with political correctness especially, to be able to express themselves the same way that they could when you were a kid, if you're listening as a millennial or a Gen X or a boomer. Any of these categories, it's like, you got to understand that there are some very specific nuanced differences. And that's the difference in the marketplace, that these are the people they are graduating college now. They are moving into the marketplace. They are spending money on vacations. And you want to know what? They don't want to buy your alcohol, period. I think it's important I know that was like kind of like a random tangent. What did that have to do with dry tripping? But why do we take vacations? Like, why would I want to go to Hawaii? Why would I want to go to Alaska? Why do I want to go, honestly, into the middle of nowhere where there's like a lot of beautiful nature, And whereas other people, they're like, I want to go to Paris. Like, I want to go to Milan. Meanwhile, like, Tyler and I are trying to figure out how we can make it to Fiji and the Tongan Islands. In New Zealand, we want to go to Polynesian countries to learn more about the industry we're in. Also, we just really love the vibe and just the presence and the spirituality that comes from it. So I just want to ask you to ask yourself, why do you like to travel? Like, where do you really want to go when you say, oh, I want to travel more? Oh, I want to go. Like, where do you want to go and why? What do you imagine yourself doing there? And if the answer is, I want to go there to drink, well, honey, you do not need to jump on a plane to do that. So usually it's because you want to experience something different. You just like this culture, so you want to, bathe in it for a little bit, or you just want to change the scenery. Maybe you like the beach. Maybe you just like the ocean and you just want to be by the ocean. You just want to lay on the beach and do nothing else. Okay, well, no matter what your activity is alcohol really going to make it better, or would a really dope, like high functioning mocktail be something that could be game changing for you? So something to consider. and I want you to keep considering as time goes on. And just a few more examples. Again, while I mentioned that we were in Hawaii, we went to multiple different places and there was a lot of zero proof options. One notable place, we were in Waikiki, and so we went to one of the Hilton's like in hotel restaurants that happened to be like by the beach. And, you know, we just kind of wanted some snacks and to just like have a place to sit and relax for a minute, honestly. And the very top of the menu were these two really delicious mocktails. My favorite, the moment I see ginger beer on there, I'm like, okay, they understood the assignment and they took this a step further. So they did not tuck this on the bottom of the menu. It was literally in the section where I've done a lot of research on menus because I professionally create menus for a living. I know the parts where you're psychologically drawn to, which parts where you put your biggest items that you want people to buy. They literally put the mocktails in the prime real estate section of the menu. So that was huge to me. And I literally did a happy dance, and it was funny because I think we were like way more hyped about it than anyone working there. But honestly, it was a big deal for us. There was also a lot of fresh juice options. Unfortunately, there was very little kava in Oahu, where I'm going to make an entire another episode about kava in Hawaii, awa in Hawaii, I should say. I digress. But point of the whole story is there is a lot of zero proof options. There could be more in Hawaii, and it was honestly quite shocking how little kava was available unless I went to a smoke shop. In Vegas, there are definitely starting to be more options on menus. I'm hoping that more establishments are going to be popping up, and you will be hearing about an update about that from me shortly because there is something super fun cooking up in Vegas. So a little sneak peek there. But honestly, there's so much room to grow. Even if, 5-10 different businesses came into the Vegas area, like the general metropolitan area, they would all succeed if they had the right business owners in place. In Phoenix, there is a lot of room. Oh my goodness. If you want to open up a zero proof alcohol free lounge or kava bar in Phoenix, there is so much room right now. One tea shop actually just closed, but that had nothing to do with lack of demand. There's a very hungry market with very few options to satisfy the demand right now. So I'm going to use the rest of this episode to talk about that. So if this is something that you're interested in opening yourself, you want to help a friend open, or you just want to learn more about it right now to understand what the hell is happening in this marketplace, here we go. So there is a lot of room in the market right now in all cities that these botanicals are legal in. Kava, if kratom's your thing, even if neither of those things are your thing and you just want to open an alcohol-free spot, there are literally 400,000 different plants out there, right? Like, we got options. And at the end of the day, it just always comes down to the nitty-gritty of the operations and creating a responsible menu. So, basically, if a business in this industry doesn't do well, that says more about the owners than it ever will say about this industry right now, because every owner that is has all of the things I'm about to mention in order, they're making money, they're doing great. It's a beautiful place to be. So let's just dive into those details. So if you've been thinking of opening up a mocktail or kava bar and lounge, I would say let this be your sign. Your time is absolutely right now, because people really do not want to drink alcohol or get caught in other addictive cycles anymore. But did you know that the only businesses that fail in this industry are entirely at fault of their leadership team? So, unpopular opinion here, there's no such thing as competition in this industry because the demand is so much larger than what the current market provides. So if you see one closing or not doing well, it says more about the owner than anything else. Those who succeed are the ones that generally and genuinely care about their community and want to see them heal. This is because of the nuance that occurs when you're dealing with a sober space. This means you need an upgraded environment. Dingy dive bars, really, you can't get away with it, honestly, when you're sober. Because when you're sober, you're more aware and you're focused and you can see the details in the space around you. You no longer have time or tolerance for things that take your attention away from wellness or take your self away from your goals. This industry is not exactly like a regular bar, and it's also not like a traditional coffee shop or a tea shop. So very likely, if you're jumping into this industry and you're listening to this and you're excited, very likely you've never done anything like this before. And I say this as someone who literally, like, when I was in college, I worked at this place that was a tea bar. Excuse me. What I mean by that is there was literally no alcohol, but there were like hundreds of teas, like literally that many varieties. And it was like a bubble tea shop, and, you know, and it stayed open later. It stayed open till midnight to allow for another option other than drinking. So I worked there, and then I worked at a nutritional chemistry company, like a lab, and I helped them, you know, basically create the nutrition labels that you see, and wrote all the SOPs to ensure that all of the sample intake was done in a way that was both respectful to the company and to the data itself. And then, you know, I worked at a Kava bar for years, and all of that being said, like, nothing prepared me for the Kava bar and the Kava experience, like, honestly, more of the personal things that had gone on in my life, because getting sober, like I mentioned, it's an experience. And even if you're not there, even if you're one of the people who are just here to pace yourself while drinking, or, you know, you're like, hey, like, I never had like a drinking problem. Come on. Like, I'm just trying to do something a little bit nicer for things. Like, there's still going to be nuances that you are going to see, that they feel small at first, but then you start to realize how big of an impact they make. So for example, if you have like a bartender coming up into work, if you're in an alcohol bar or even a coffee shop, let's talk alcohol bar first. You can almost be like, yeah, I'm having a shitty day. What the fuck ever. Let's take some shots. Me. And like, you know, that kind of attitude kind of works there sometimes. And then if we're talking like a coffee shop, you can literally, how to put it, coffee shops are just not as personable as they used to be honest with you. Like when I was in college, and even then they were busy, you know, so it's not the same. It's not like how some people view bartenders as therapists. Like very few people see baristas in that light, because baristas are usually busy. They have to make a drink. You have like a 2-minute interaction with them, end of the day. But a bartender, you're staying at the bar, right? So what does it mean if you have a sober bar? Like, how is that environment different? Well, first off, you can't walk behind the bar and say you had a bad day, because everyone is going to pick up on it because they're sober. They can feel you. They're no longer desensitized. In fact, they're incredibly sensitive right now. So if you can't keep a hold of your own attitude and your own bad mood, and you don't have good company culture to support your staff if they're having a bad day, well, then everyone in the community is going to feel it, and they're not going to want to drink your drinks, because it's about an experience here. It's about creating atmosphere. Very different. In coffee shops, you know, the loud espresso machines, the vibe of getting work done. Like, yeah, sometimes people meet their friends there, but let's be real. You don't just like talk to like random people you've never met at a coffee shop nearly as much as you would as if you're at a Kava bar. If you're at a Kava bar, I'm an introvert, by the way. It takes me a lot to get me out of my shell, so thank goodness for my husband helping me do so and helping me connect more deeply with the world. But when I'm in a Kava bar, if I'm drinking Kava, I will talk to strangers all day long, and we will talk about, you know, deep things and spirituality and wellness and life-changing things very quickly, whereas that would never happen in a coffee shop. Like, literally, of the years of me attending coffee shops, like going there, like when I was in college, my breakfast was an Americano. I never had nearly as deep of conversations or experiences at coffee shops, at that tea bar, anywhere compared to a Kava bar. And that speaks to the type of botanical that you are serving. Let's say you don't want Kava, you're not interested in it, you're just doing an alcohol-free concept. You're still going to have, like, just because you're alcohol free doesn't mean you're effect free. You know, even dandelions, you know, something that we're taught as kids is a weed in the yard. Dandelions are something that can have an amazing effect on your health, and you can actually feel it when you're drinking it. So it's not that alcohol-free means effect-free. It just means we're in a totally different atmosphere. This is a different context, different vibe. And you want to be mindful of those nuances. And I'm not trying to gatekeep like, oh, who are you to know that? Like, anybody can learn these things. But if you're not aware of them, you may not pick up on that and not realize how important it is, and you may sabotage your own business. So all that being said, this means that you need an upgraded company culture, one of awareness, presence, and kindness. So this means you need to have a healthy staff and a healthy communication system, healthy operations. Side note, I have an entire program called Effortless Operations that literally is like all about this. It is a 3-month-long deep dive into how to create a healthy staff with healthy company culture, healthy communication systems, and healthy operations. Because all of those things I just mentioned come from having healthy operations. If you have great SOPs, you have great concepts to begin with, then you just need to set up your business in a way that actually reflects that to ensure that everybody's taken care of. This also means you need an upgraded standard of behavior. So it takes a team to pull off hosting an incredible sober experience. This means we need to have conversations with our staff. We need to have staff meetings, or if you don't have staff yet, if you're kind of in like an adjacent, maybe you're a mobile bar that you do it yourself, well, then you need to be having conversations with your collaborators, your community members, and really just make sure that you are sober. The definition of sober is not just like not drinking, right? It's this awareness. You are here, present, and like you have a sober train of thought. Like you're not hyped up on rose tinted glasses from other things either. Like you are literally just stone cold. So like you are here, present, and aware, and you're doing what you can to make the now absolutely beautiful. You also want to make sure that you create a menu that won't relapse people, right? So for example, it's not about just creating a mocktail that finds an alternative way of getting people faded. That's not helpful. It's definitely not about packaging things in a way that basically idolizes the cocktail that caused the downfall in the first place. What I mean by this is sober people don't want your alcohol-free old fashions. They don't want your alcohol-free Manhattans. They want something functional. If you just handed me an alcohol-free Manhattan that tasted exactly like a Manhattan, but had no functional properties, had nothing other than like, oh, look, we like made something that's a fake of it. Like no one wants that. Like no sober person wants that. Maybe those people who are still drinking, who are trying to pace themselves, they might want it, but like I'm telling you, no one who's sober wants that. They want something functional and delicious and different. So you really got to understand who your market is, and if you have both, you need to make sure your menu is created in a way that's so thoughtful, because as you heard in my last episode, when I interviewed the awesome founders of Saria Brewing Company, we learned that alcohol-free and non-alcoholic are not the same thing, right? Non-alcoholic still has trace amounts of alcohol in it. So if you drink a 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer, you may as well take a shot of whiskey. You really want to have that on your menu when you're like a business that's like, hey, we're here to help people who are sober. Like, well, that will relapse them. So congratulations, you're not being thoughtful. So, but if you wanted to serve both people in your space, both the people who drink but just want to pace themselves versus the super sober people, then make separate parts of the menu that says, hey, if you're super sober, like touch this whole page. This is what's good for you. But if you are not sober and you need help, or you just want to have a good time, whatever, well, these just know that there are trace amounts of alcohol, so this could be tempting to people. So like if you're in AA, don't touch this menu, stuff like that. Like you can do it, you just have to be educational. You also don't want to follow the first recipe you find on Google. It's probably wrong. Again, reach out. All of these things I'm mentioning, please reach out to me if you have any questions. Like my husband and I were literally trained by a Fijian on how to do these things, and we continue to spend any extra time or additional resources we have on learning more, because this is so deeply, profoundly important to us that like if you feel any sort of like zhuzh in my voice right now, it's because I'm pretty upset right now. There were a few businesses that, we were trying to help, and they're doing things that go against a lot of the advice that I give here. So I think it's really important to, just be really mindful of what recipes you are following, and understand that just because someone gives you an SOP, that doesn't mean it's a good SOP. We also don't want to assume all botanicals work the same. So let's say you worked in another adjacent industry and you're like, oh, well, I've worked with some herbs before, but not all of these. You can't assume it's the same, because different herbs come from different contexts, right? So for example, a lot of kava, to bring it back to Fiji, what's going on in Fiji is going to be different than what's going on in the other parts of the world. So you can't compare the kava industry to the coffee industry. It's different right now. They're completely different. Same thing with cannabis, same thing with any sort of botanical that is in the alternative industry. That doesn't mean that all alternative botanicals are in the same industry. There's going to be different nuance to them. And lastly, what's really important to note is this is not just about seizing an opportunity. If you're here because you just see a hot market to take advantage of, but you're not interested in doing all of these things that I'm recommending, your business will likely not do very well for a multitude of reasons. Number one, your product is going to make people feel bad. And then number two, that's going to bring in bad reviews. And number three, that's going to bring in people like me, who's going to put you on blast, because I feel very uncomfortable walking into establishments that are serving things inappropriately. And I always raise my voice about it because that's the industry I'm in. I can't help it. So, if I come into your business and give you a compliment, like, take it. But also, if I come in your business and I give you a piece of advice, like, please just consider it, because we want to make sure, like, these are real people that you're helping. Like, I'm here to help you do this responsibly, both for the health of your community and for the health of your wallet. Like, you have no idea how many people you can help until you've gotten out of your own way to make this dream happen. It's beautiful, like, truly life-changing. Like, I literally... So many things have changed for me since moving into the kava industry and general alcohol-free industry. And a lot of that has come from watching people recover and then being that safe place for them, and just seeing how many people, may not be here today if it wasn't for just serving them a nice little drink, a nice little responsible, happy drink. I'm also here to advise you to check your ego at the door, because there are real people who are about to see real healing from your product. But if you get in the way of that, then your business is going to decline. That means that they're going to no longer have a place to go and feel better. The thing is, I've met previously successful entrepreneurs, like people who've literally made millions, who can't seem to get this industry right because they think they already know it all because they were successful in another industry. This story is very common, like very common. And it brings a little tear to my eye every time, because if we all just remember that we're students of life and there's always something to learn, and that plants can teach and heal quite a bit, then you're good to go. But if you think you know it all and your business savvy can get you through without any help or connection, then you're forgetting kind of what the definition of sobriety really is. And side note, I did bring this up in a previous episode, and also we'll talk about it more in the future, but sobriety is not just about not having things in your system, but it's also about being in community, because when we're in addiction, we are alone. But when we are in community and in our sobriety, then we feel connected. We feel purpose. We feel all the things that we felt deprived of that caused us into those addictions, right? I'm also here to help you understand that, we're not just talking about regular mixology here. So like if you won some mixology competitions, like in the bartending industry, that's cool. Like that'll help you with flavor profiles. But if you haven't worked with each of these plants, like these botanicals, understanding the holistic aspect of them, not just the way they taste and smell, but what they do for your body, you might run into problems here, right? So all of us have so much to learn from each other. And I say all of that, but I don't think I'm better than a lead mixologist that won awesome competitions. I'm sure I can learn a lot about flavor profile from them too. I stay in my lane and I try to educate myself and others so that we can all share all of this and do this as responsibly as possible. And it's not just out of respect, it's literally out of caring for people. I'm also not saying that you need to be sober to be good at this, but I am saying that if you don't want to understand sobriety outside of your own experience, you will not succeed here. I said it, I stand behind it. It's very important. This industry is also not just about pacing drinkers. I say this over and over again, but it's about creating a whole new world outside of blackouts and bad decisions. We're creating a new space with new experiences here. This is going to be life-changing for all who are involved, yourself included. So if you have any questions at all, please let me know by sending me an email, hello@marinamars.com. I've also got a free zero-proof mixology business guide available on my website via marinamars.com/themodernmocktail. So check that out if you're not quite ready to chat with me one-on-one, but you just need some more fruit for thought to get your idea going. I will always be here for you. It'll always be in different capacities depending on the time. So if you see an offer that speaks to you, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know so we can do something to make a difference in your life. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, just let me know if you need anything.